Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, at Jamaica Hospital in the New York City borough of Queens, the fourth child of Fred Trump and Marianne McLeod Trump. He is of German and Scottish descent. He grew up with his older siblings, Marianne, Fred Jr., and Elizabeth, and his younger brother, Robert, in a mansion in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens. Fred Trump paid his children each about $20,000 a year, equivalent to $265,000 a year in 2024. Trump was a millionaire at age 8 by contemporary standards. Trump attended the private Q Forest School through 7th grade. He was a difficult child and showed an early interest in his father's business. His father enrolled him in New York Military Academy, a private boarding school, to complete secondary school. Trump considered a show business career but instead in 1964 enrolled at Fordham University. 2 years later, he transferred to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in May 1968 with a Bachelor of Science in Economics. He was exempted from the draft during the Vietnam War due to a claim of bone spurs in his heels. Starting in 1968, Trump was employed at his father's real estate company, Trump Management, which owned racially segregated middle-class rental housing in New York City's outer boroughs. In 1971, his father made him president of the company and he began using the Trump Organization as an umbrella brand. Roy Cohn was Trump's fixer, lawyer, and mentor for 13 years in the 1970s and 1980s. In 1973, Cohn helped Trump countersue the U.S. government for $100 million, equivalent to $708 million in 2024, over its charges that Trump's properties had racially discriminatory practices. Trump's counterclaims were dismissed, and the government's case was settled with the Trumps signing a consent decree agreeing to desegregate. 4 years later, Trumps again faced the courts when they were found in contempt of the decree. Before age 30, he showed his propensity for litigation, no matter the outcome and cost. Even when he lost, he described the case as a win. Helping Trump projects, Cohn was a consigliere whose mafia connections controlled construction unions. Cohn introduced political consultant Roger Stone to Trump, who enlisted Stone's services to deal with the federal government. Between 1991 and 2009, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection for 6 of his businesses: the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, the casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and the Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts Company. In 1992, Trump, his siblings Marianne, Elizabeth, and Robert, and his cousin John W. Walter, each with a 20% share, formed All County Building Supply and Maintenance Corporation. The company had no offices and is alleged to have been a shell company for paying the vendors providing services and supplies for Trump's rental units, then billing those services and supplies to Trump management with markups of 20 to 50% and more. The owners shared the proceeds generated by the markups. The increased costs were used to get state approval for increasing the rents of his rent-stabilized units. Trump attracted public attention in 1978 with the launch of his family's first Manhattan venture, the renovation of the derelict Commodore Hotel, adjacent to Grand Central Terminal. The financing was facilitated by a $400 million city property tax abatement arranged for him by his father, who also, jointly with Hyatt, guaranteed a $70 million bank construction loan. The hotel reopened in 1980 as the Grand Hyatt Hotel, and that same year, he obtained rights to develop Trump Tower, a mixed-use skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The building houses the headquarters of the Trump Corporation and Trump's PAC and was his primary residence until 2019. In 1988, Trump acquired the Plaza Hotel with a loan from a consortium of 16 banks. The hotel filed for bankruptcy protection in 1992, and a reorganization plan was approved a month later, with the banks taking control of the property. In 1995, he defaulted on over $3 billion of bank loans, and the lenders seized the Plaza Hotel along with most of his other properties in a vast and humiliating restructuring that allowed him to avoid personal bankruptcy. The lead bank's attorney said of the bank's decision that they all agreed that he'd be better alive than dead. In 1996, Trump acquired and renovated the mostly vacant 71-story skyscraper at 40 Wall Street, later rebranded as the Trump Building. In the early 1990s, he won the right to develop a 70-acre, 28 hectares, tract in the Lincoln Square neighborhood near the Hudson River. Struggling with debt from other ventures in 1994, he sold most of his interest in the project to Asian investors, who financed the project's completion, Riverside South. Trump's last major construction project was the 92-story mixed-use Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago, which opened in 2008. In 2024, The New York Times and ProPublica reported that the Internal Revenue Service was investigating whether he had twice written off losses incurred through construction cost overruns and lagging sales of residential units in the building he had declared to be worthless on his 2008 tax return. In 1984, Trump opened Harrah's at Trump Plaza, a hotel and casino, with financing and management help from the Holiday Corporation. It was unprofitable, and he paid Holiday $70 million in May 1986 to take sole control. In 1985, he bought the unopened Atlantic City Hilton Hotel and renamed it Trump Castle. Both casinos filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1992. Trump bought a third Atlantic City venue in 1988, the Trump Taj Mahal. It was financed with $675 million in junk bonds and completed for $1.1 billion, opening in April 1990. He filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1991. Under the provisions of the restructuring agreement, he gave up half his initial stake and personally guaranteed future performance. To reduce his $900 million of personal debt, he sold the Trump Shuttle airline, his mega yacht, the Trump Princess, which had been leased to his casinos and kept docked, and other businesses. In 1995, Trump founded Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts, THCR, which assumed ownership of the Trump Plaza. THCR purchased the Taj Mahal and the Trump Castle in 1996 and went bankrupt in 2004 and 2009, leaving him with 10% ownership. He remained chairman until 2009. In 1985, Trump acquired the Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. In 1995, he converted the estate into a private club with an initiation fee and annual dues. He continued to use a wing of the house as a private residence. He declared the club his primary residence in 2019. He began building and buying golf courses in 1999, owning 17 golf courses by 2016. The Trump Organization often licensed the Trump name for consumer products and services, including foodstuffs, apparel, learning courses, and home furnishings. Over 50 licensing or management deals involved Trump's name, generating at least $59 million for his companies. By 2018, only 2 consumer goods companies continued to license his name. During the 2000s, Trump licensed his name to residential property developments worldwide, 40 of which were never built. In 1970, Trump invested $70,000 to receive billing as co-producer of a Broadway comedy. In September 1983, he purchased the New Jersey Generals, a team in the United States Football League. After the 1985 season, the league folded, largely due to his attempt to move to a fall schedule, when it would have competed with the National Football League for audience, and trying to force a merger with the NFL by bringing an antitrust suit. Trump and his Plaza Hotel hosted several boxing matches at the Atlantic City Convention Hall. In 1989 and 1990, he lent his name to the Tour de Trump cycling stage race, an attempt to create an American equivalent of European races such as the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia. From 1986 to 1988, he purchased significant blocks of shares in various public companies while suggesting that he intended to take over the company and then sold his shares for a profit, leading some observers to think he was engaged in greenmail. The New York Times found that he initially made millions of dollars in such stock transactions, but lost most, if not all, of those gains after investors stopped taking his takeover talk seriously. In 1988, Trump purchased the Eastern Airlines shuttle, financing the purchase with $380 million, equivalent to $1,010 million in 2024, in loans from a syndicate of 22 banks. He renamed the airline Trump Shuttle and operated it until 1992. He defaulted on his loans in 1991, and ownership passed to the banks. In 1996, he purchased the Miss Universe pageants, including Miss USA and Miss Teen USA. Due to disagreements with CBS about scheduling, he took both pageants to NBC in 2002. In 2007, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his work as producer of Miss Universe. NBC and Univision dropped the pageants in June 2015 in reaction to his comments about Mexican immigrants. In 2005, Trump co-founded Trump University, a company that sold real estate seminars for up to $35,000. After New York state authorities notified the company that its use of university violated state law, as it was not an academic institution, its name was changed to the Trump Entrepreneur Initiative in 2010. In 2013, the state of New York filed a $40 million civil suit against Trump University, alleging that the company made false statements and defrauded consumers. Additionally, 2 class actions were filed in federal court against Trump and his companies. Internal documents revealed that employees were instructed to use a hard sell approach, and former employees testified that Trump University had defrauded or lied to its students. Shortly after he won the 2016 presidential election, he agreed to pay a total of $25 million to settle the three cases. The Donald J. Trump Foundation was a private foundation established in 1988. From 1987 to 2006, Trump gave his foundation $5.4 million, which had been spent by the end of 2006. After donating a total of $65,000 in 2007 to 2008, he stopped donating any personal funds to the charity, which received millions from other donors, including $5 million from Vince McMahon. The foundation gave to health and sports-related charities, conservative groups, and charities that held events at Trump properties. In 2016, The Washington Post reported that the charity had committed several potential legal and ethical violations, including self-dealing and tax evasion. Also in 2016, the New York Attorney General said the foundation had violated state law by soliciting donations without submitting to required annual external audits and ordered it to cease its fundraising activities in New York immediately. Trump's team announced in December 2016 that the foundation would be dissolved. In June 2018, the New York Attorney General's office filed a civil suit against the foundation, Trump, and his adult children, seeking $2.8 million in restitution and additional penalties. In December 2018, the foundation ceased operation and dispersed its assets to other charities. In November 2019, a New York state judge ordered Trump to pay $2 million to a group of charities for misusing the foundation's funds, in part to finance his presidential campaign. According to a review of state and federal court files conducted by USA Today in 2018, Trump and his businesses had been involved in more than 4,000 state and federal legal actions. While he has not filed for personal bankruptcy, his over-leveraged hotel and casino businesses in Atlantic City and New York filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 6 times between 1991 and 2009. They continued to operate while the banks restructured debt and reduced his shares in the properties. During the 1980s, more than 70 banks had lent Trump $4 billion. After his corporate bankruptcies of the early 1990s, most major banks, with the exception of Deutsche Bank, declined to lend to him. After the January 6 Capitol attack, the bank decided not to do business with him or his affiliated company in the future. Trump has said he began his career with a small loan of $1 million from his father and that he had to pay it back with interest. He borrowed at least $60 million from his father, largely did not repay the loans, and received another $413 million, 2018 equivalent, adjusted for inflation, from his father's company. Posing as a Trump Organization official named John Barron, Trump called journalist Jonathan Greenberg in 1984, trying to get a higher ranking on the Forbes 400 list of wealthy Americans. Trump self-reported his net worth over a wide range, from -$900 million in 1990, to $10 billion in 2015. In 2015, Forbes estimated his net worth at $4.5 billion, based on interviews with more than 80 sources. In 2025, the magazine estimated his net worth at $5.1 billion and ranked him the 700th wealthiest person in the world. Trump has published 19 books under his name, most written or co-written by ghostwriters. His first book, The Art of the Deal, 1987, was a New York Times bestseller, and was credited by The New Yorker with making Trump famous as an emblem of the successful tycoon. The book was ghostwritten by Tony Schwartz, who is credited as a co-author. Trump had cameos in many films and television shows from 1985 to 2001. Trump acquired his style of politics from professional wrestling, with its staged fights and name-calling. He sporadically appeared for the professional wrestling company WWE from the late 1980s, including WrestleMania 23 and 2007. Starting in the 1990s, Trump appeared 24 times as a guest on the nationally syndicated Howard Stern Show. He had his own short-form talk radio program, Trumped, from 2004 to 2008. From 2011 until 2015, he was a guest commentator on Fox and Friends. In 2021, Trump, who had been a member since 1989, resigned from SAG-AFTRA to avoid a disciplinary hearing regarding the January 6 attack. 2 days later, the union permanently barred him. Producer Mark Burnett made Trump a television star when he created The Apprentice, which Trump hosted from 2004 to 2015, including variant The Celebrity Apprentice. On the shows, he was a super-rich chief executive who eliminated contestants with the catchphrase "You're fired." The New York Times called his portrayal a highly flattering, highly fictionalized version of himself. The shows remade Trump's image for millions of viewers nationwide. With the related licensing agreements, they earned him more than $400 million. Trump registered as a Republican in 1987, a member of the Independence Party, the New York State affiliate of the Reform Party, in 1999, a Democrat in 2001, a Republican in 2009, unaffiliated in 2011, and a Republican in 2012. In 1987, Trump placed full-page advertisements in major newspapers expressing his views on foreign policy and how to eliminate the federal budget deficit. In 1988, he approached Lee Atwater, asking to be put into consideration to be Republican nominee George H. W. Bush's running mate. Bush found the request strange and unbelievable. Trump was a candidate in the 2000 Reform Party presidential primaries for 3 months before he withdrew in February 2000. In 2011, Trump considered challenging President Barack Obama in the 2012 election. He spoke at the Conservative Political Action Conference in February and gave speeches in states with early primaries. In May 2011, he announced that he would not run. Trump announced his candidacy for the 2016 election in June 2015. He became the Republican frontrunner in March 2016 and was declared the presumptive Republican nominee in May. His campaign statements were often opaque and suggestive, and a record number were false. He was highly critical of media coverage and frequently made claims of media bias. Hillary Clinton led Trump in national polling averages throughout the campaign, but her lead narrowed in early July. In mid-July, he selected Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate, and the two were officially nominated at the 2016 Republican National Convention. Trump and Clinton participated in 3 presidential debates in September and October 2016. He twice refused to say whether he would accept the result of the election. Trump described NATO as obsolete and espoused views that were described as non-interventionist and protectionist. His campaign platform emphasized renegotiating U.S.-China relations and free trade agreements such as NAFTA and strongly enforcing immigration laws. Other campaign positions included pursuing energy independence while opposing climate change regulations, modernizing services for veterans, repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, abolishing Common Core education standards, investing in infrastructure, simplifying the tax code while reducing taxes, and imposing tariffs on imports by companies that offshore jobs. He advocated increasing military spending and extreme vetting or banning of immigrants from Muslim-majority countries. Trump's proposed immigration policies were a topic of bitter debate during the 2016 campaign. He promised to build a wall on the Mexico-U.S. border to restrict illegal movement and vowed that Mexico would pay for it. He pledged to deport millions of illegal immigrants residing in the U.S., and criticized birthright citizenship for incentivizing anchor babies. According to an Analysis in Political Science Quarterly, Trump made explicitly racist and sexist appeals to win over white voters during his 2016 presidential campaign. In particular, his campaign launch speech drew criticism for claiming Mexican immigrants were bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. In response, NBC fired him from Celebrity Apprentice. Trump's FEC required reports listed assets above $1.4 billion and outstanding debts of at least $315 million. He did not release his tax returns, contrary to the practice of every major candidate since 1976 and his promises in 2014 and 2015 to do so if he ran for office. He said his tax returns were being audited, and that his lawyers had advised him against releasing them. After a lengthy court battle to block release of his tax returns and other records to the Manhattan District Attorney for a criminal investigation, including 2 appeals by Trump to the U.S. Supreme Court, in February 2021 the High Court allowed the records to be released to the prosecutor for review by a grand jury. In October 2016, portions of Trump's state filings for 1995 were leaked to a reporter from the New York Times. They show that he had declared a loss of $916 million that year, which could have let him avoid taxes for up to 18 years. On November 8, 2016, Trump received 306 pledged electoral votes versus 232 for Clinton. After elector defections on both sides, the official count was 304 to 227. The fifth person to be elected president despite losing the popular vote, he received nearly 2.9 million fewer votes than Clinton, 46.3% to her 48.25%. He was the only president who neither served in the military nor held any government office prior to becoming president. His victory marked the return of an undivided Republican government, a Republican president combined with Republican control of both chambers of Congress. Trump's victory sparked protests in major U.S. cities. Trump was inaugurated on January 20, 2017. The day after his inauguration, an estimated 2.6 million people worldwide, including 500,000 in Washington, D.C., protested against him and the women's marches. During his first week in office, Trump signed 6 executive orders, including authorizing procedures for repealing the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, advancement of the Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline projects, and planning for a wall along the U.S. border with Mexico. Before being inaugurated, Trump moved his businesses into a revocable trust, rather than a blind trust or equivalent arrangement to cleanly sever himself from his business interests. He continued to profit from his businesses and knew how his administration's policies affected them. Although he said he would eschew new foreign deals, the Trump Organization pursued operational expansions in Scotland, Dubai, and the Dominican Republic. Lobbyists, foreign government officials, and Trump donors and allies generated hundreds of millions of dollars for his resorts and hotels. Trump was sued for violating the domestic and foreign emoluments clauses of the U.S. Constitution, the first time that the clauses had been substantively litigated. One case was dismissed in lower court. 2 were dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court as moot after his term. Trump took office at the height of the longest economic expansion in American history, which began in 2009 and continued until February 2020, when the COVID-19 recession began. In December 2017, he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. It reduced tax rates for businesses and individuals and eliminated the penalty associated with the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate. The Trump administration claimed that the act would not decrease government revenue, but 2018 revenues were 7.6% lower than projected. Under Trump, the federal budget deficit increased by almost 50%, to nearly $1 trillion in 2019. By the end of his term, the U.S. national debt increased by 39%, reaching $27.75 trillion, and the U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio hit a post-World War II high. Trump also failed to deliver the $1 trillion infrastructure spending plan on which he had campaigned. Trump is the only modern U.S. president to leave office with a smaller workforce than when he took office, by 3 million people. He rejects the scientific consensus on climate change. He reduced the budget for renewable energy research by 40% and reversed Obama-era policies directed at curbing climate change. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement, making the U.S. the only nation to not ratify it. He aimed to boost the production and exports of fossil fuels. Natural gas expanded under Trump, but coal continued to decline. He rolled back more than 100 federal environmental regulations, including those that curbed greenhouse gas emissions, air and water pollution, and the use of toxic substances. He weakened protections for animals and environmental standards for federal infrastructure projects, and expanded permitted areas for drilling and resource extraction, such as allowing drilling in the Arctic Refuge. Trump dismantled federal regulations on health, labor, the environment, and other areas, including a bill that made it easier for severely mentally ill persons to buy guns. During his first 6 weeks in office, he delayed, suspended, or reversed 90 federal regulations, often after requests by the regulated industries. The Institute for Policy Integrity found that 78% of his proposals were blocked by courts or did not prevail over litigation. During his campaign, Trump vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. In office, he scaled back the act's implementation through executive orders. He expressed a desire to let Obamacare fail, his administration halved the enrollment period and drastically reduced funding for enrollment promotion. In June 2018, the Trump administration joined 18 Republican-led states in arguing before the Supreme Court that the elimination of the financial penalties associated with the individual mandate had rendered the act unconstitutional. Their pleading would have eliminated health insurance coverage for up to 23 million Americans, but was unsuccessful. During the 2016 campaign, Trump promised to protect funding for Medicare and other social safety net programs. In January 2020, he expressed willingness to consider cuts to them. In response to the opioid epidemic, Trump signed legislation in 2018 to increase funding for drug treatments, but was widely criticized for failing to make a concrete strategy. He barred organizations that provide abortions or abortion referrals from receiving federal funds. He said he supported traditional marriage, but considered the nationwide legality of same-sex marriage settled. His administration rolled back key components of the Obama administration's workplace protections against discrimination of LGBTQ people. His attempted rollback of anti-discrimination protections for transgender patients in August 2020 was halted by a federal judge after a Supreme Court ruling extended employees' civil rights protections to gender identity and sexual orientation. Trump has said he is opposed to gun control, although his views have shifted over time. His administration took an anti-marijuana position, revoking Obama-era policies that provided protections for states that legalized marijuana. He is a longtime advocate of capital punishment, and his administration oversaw the federal government execute 13 prisoners, more than in the previous 56 years combined, ending a 17-year moratorium. In 2016, he said he supported the use of interrogation torture methods such as waterboarding. Trump's comments on the 2017 Unite the Right rally, condemning this egregious display of hatred, bigotry and violence on many sides and stating that there were very fine people on both sides, were criticized as implying a moral equivalence between the white supremacist demonstrators and the counter-protesters. In a January 2018 discussion of immigration legislation, he reportedly referred to El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, and African nations as shithole countries. His remarks were condemned as racist. In July 2019, Trump tweeted that 4 Democratic Congresswomen, all minorities, 3 of whom are native-born Americans, should go back to the countries they came from. 2 days later the House of Representatives voted 240 to 187, mostly along party lines, to condemn his racist comments. White nationalist publications and social media praised his remarks, which continued over the following days. He continued to make similar remarks during his 2020 campaign. In June 2020, during the George Floyd protests, federal law enforcement officials controversially removed a largely peaceful crowd of lawful protesters from Lafayette Square, outside the White House. Trump then posed with a Bible for a photo op at the nearby St. John's Episcopal Church, with religious leaders condemning both the treatment of protesters and the photo opportunity itself. Many retired military leaders and defense officials condemned his proposal to use the U.S. military against anti-police brutality protesters. During his first term, Trump granted 237 requests for clemency, fewer than all presidents since 1900 with the exception of George H. W. Bush and George W. Bush. Only 25 of them had been vetted by the Justice Department's Office of the Pardon Attorney, the others were granted to people with personal or political connections to him, his family, and his allies, or recommended by celebrities. In his last full day in office, he granted 73 pardons and commuted 70 sentences. Several Trump allies were not eligible for pardons under Justice Department rules, and in other cases the department had opposed clemency. The pardons of 3 military service members convicted of or charged with violent crimes were opposed by military leaders. As president, Trump described illegal immigration as an invasion of the United States and drastically escalated immigration enforcement. He implemented harsh policies against asylum seekers and deployed nearly 6,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border to stop illegal crossings. He reduced the number of refugees admitted to record lows, from an annual limit of 110,000 before he took office to 15,000 in 2021. Trump also increased restrictions on granting permanent residency to immigrants needing public benefits. One of his central campaign promises was to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. During his first term, the U.S. built 73 miles, 117 kilometers, of wall in areas without barriers and 365 miles, 587 kilometers, to replace older barriers. In 2018, Trump's refusal to sign any spending bill unless it allocated funding for the border wall resulted in the longest-ever federal government shutdown, for 35 days from December 2018 to January 2019. The shutdown ended after he agreed to fund the government without any funds for the wall. To avoid another shutdown, Congress passed a funding bill with $1.4 billion for border fencing in February. Trump later declared a national emergency on the southern border to divert $6.1 billion of funding to the border wall despite congressional disagreement. In January 2017, Trump signed an executive order that temporarily denied entry to citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries. The order caused many protests and legal challenges that resulted in nationwide injunctions. A revised order giving some exceptions was also blocked by courts, but the Supreme Court ruled in June that the ban could be enforced on those lacking a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the U.S. Trump replaced the ban in September with a presidential proclamation extending travel bans to North Koreans, Chadians, and some Venezuelan officials, but excluded Iraq and Sudan. The Supreme Court allowed that version to go into effect in December 2017, and ultimately upheld the ban in 2019. From 2017 to 2018, The Trump administration had a policy of family separation that separated over 4,400 children of migrant families from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border. An unprecedented policy sparked public outrage in the country. Despite Trump initially blaming Democrats and insisting he could not stop the policy with an executive order, he acceded to public pressure in June 2018 and mandated that migrant families be detained together unless there is a concern of risk for the child. A judge later ordered that the families be reunited and further separation stopped except in limited circumstances, though over 1,000 additional children were separated from their families after the order. Trump described himself as a nationalist and his foreign policy as America First. He supported populist, neo-nationalist, and authoritarian governments. Unpredictability, uncertainty, and inconsistency characterized foreign relations during his tenure. Relations between the U.S. and its European allies were strained under Trump. He criticized NATO allies and privately suggested that the U.S. should withdraw from NATO. Trump supported many of the policies of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In 2020, Trump hosted the signing of the Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain to normalize their foreign relations. Trump began a trade war with China in 2018 after imposing tariffs and other trade barriers he said would force China to end long-standing unfair trade practice and intellectual property infringement. Trump weakened the toughest U.S. sanctions imposed after the 2014 Russian annexation of Crimea. Trump praised and, according to some critics, rarely criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin, though he opposed some actions of Russia's government. He withdrew the U.S. from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, citing alleged Russian non-compliance, and supported Russia's possible return to the G7. As North Korea's nuclear weapons were increasingly seen as a serious threat, Trump became the first sitting U.S. president to meet a North Korean leader, meeting Kim Jong-un 3 times, in Singapore in June 2018, in Hanoi in February 2019, and in the Korean Demilitarized Zone in June 2019. Talks in October 2019 broke down and no denuclearization agreement was reached. By the end of Trump's first year in office, 34% of his original staff had resigned, been fired, or been reassigned. As of early July 2018, 61% of his senior aides had left and 141 staffers had left in the previous year. Both figures set a record for recent presidents. Close personal aides to Trump quit or were forced out. He publicly disparaged several of his former top officials. Trump had 4 White House chiefs of staff, marginalizing or pushing out several. In May 2017, he dismissed FBI Director James Comey, saying a few days later that he was concerned about Comey's role in the Trump-Russia investigations. 3 of Trump's 15 original cabinet members left or were forced to resign within his first year. Trump was slow to appoint second-tier officials in the executive branch, saying many of the positions are unnecessary. In October 2017, there were hundreds of sub-cabinet positions without a nominee. By January 8, 2019, of 706 key positions, 433 had been filled and he had no nominee for 264. Trump appointed 226 federal judges, including 54 to the Courts of Appeals and 3 to the Supreme Court: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. His Supreme Court appointments politically shifted the court to the right. In the 2016 campaign, he pledged that Roe v. Wade would be overturned automatically if he were elected and given the opportunity to appoint 2 or 3 anti-abortion justices. He later took credit when Roe was overturned by Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022. All 3 of his Supreme Court nominees voted with the majority. Trump disparaged courts and judges he disagreed with, often in personal terms, and questioned the judiciary's constitutional authority. His attacks on courts drew rebukes from observers, including sitting federal judges, concerned about the effect of his statements on the judicial independence and public confidence in the judiciary. Trump initially ignored public health warnings and calls for action from health officials within his administration. Trump established the White House Coronavirus Task Force on January 29. On March 27, he signed into law the CARES Act, a $2.2 trillion bipartisan economic stimulus bill, the largest stimulus in U.S. history. After weeks of attacks to draw attention away from his slow response, Trump halted funding of the World Health Organization in April. In April 2020, Republican-connected groups organized anti-lockdown protests against the measures state governments were taking to combat the pandemic. Trump encouraged the protests on Twitter, although the targeted states did not meet his administration's guidelines for reopening. He repeatedly pressured federal health agencies to take actions he favored, such as approving unproven treatments. In October, Trump was hospitalized at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for 3 days with a severe case of COVID-19. After he assumed office, Trump was the subject of increasing Justice Department and congressional scrutiny, with investigations covering his election campaign, transition, and inauguration, actions taken during his presidency, his private businesses, personal taxes, and charitable foundation. There were 10 federal criminal investigations, 8 state and local investigations, and 12 congressional investigations. In July 2016, the FBI launched Crossfire Hurricane, an investigation into possible links between Russia and Trump's 2016 campaign. After Trump fired Comey in May 2017, the FBI opened a second investigation into Trump's personal and business dealings with Russia. In January 2017, 3 U.S. intelligence agencies jointly stated with high confidence that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election to favor Trump. Many suspicious links between Trump associates and Russian officials were discovered. Trump told Russian officials he was unconcerned about Russia's election interference. Crossfire Hurricane was later transferred to Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation. The investigation into Trump's ties to Russia was ended by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein after he told the FBI that Mueller would pursue the matter. At the request of Rosenstein, the Mueller investigation examined criminal matters in connection with Russia's 2016 election interference. Mueller submitted his final report in March 2019. The report found that Russia did interfere in 2016 to favor Trump and that Trump and his campaign welcomed and encouraged the effort, but that the evidence did not establish that Trump campaign members conspired or coordinated with Russia. Trump claimed the report exonerated him despite Mueller writing that it did not. The report also detailed potential obstruction of justice by Trump but did not draw ultimate conclusions and left the decision to charge the laws to Congress. In April 2019, the House Oversight Committee issued subpoenas seeking financial details from Trump's banks, Deutsche Bank and Capital One, and his accounting firm, Mazars USA. He sued the banks, Mazars, and committee chair Elijah Cummings to prevent the disclosures. In May, 2 judges ruled that both Mazars and the banks must comply with the subpoenas. Trump's attorneys appealed. In September 2022, Trump and the committee agreed to a settlement regarding Mazars, and the firm began turning over documents. Trump was impeached twice by the House of Representatives during his first presidential term, though acquitted by the Senate on both occasions. The first impeachment arose from a whistleblower complaint that in 2019 Trump had pressured Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden, in an attempt to gain an advantage in the 2020 presidential election. In December 2019, the House voted to impeach Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and the Senate acquitted him in February 2020. The second impeachment came after the January 6 attack, for which the House charged Trump with incitement of insurrection on January 13, 2021. Trump left office on January 20 and was acquitted on February 13. 7 Republican senators voted for conviction. Trump filed to run for re-election only a few hours after becoming president in 2017. He held his first re-election rally less than a month after taking office and officially became the Republican nominee in August 2020. Trump's campaign focused on crime, claiming that cities would descend into lawlessness if Democratic nominee Joe Biden won. He repeatedly misrepresented Biden's positions and appealed to racism. Starting in early 2020, Trump sowed doubts about the election, claiming without evidence that it would be rigged and that widespread use of mail balloting would produce massive election fraud. He blocked funding for the U.S. Postal Service, saying he wanted to prevent any increase in voting by mail. He repeatedly refused to say whether he would accept the results if he lost and commit to a peaceful transition of power. Biden won the November 2020 election, receiving 81.3 million votes, 51.3%, to Trump's 74.2 million, 46.8%, and 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232. The Electoral College formalized Biden's victory on December 14 even before the results were known on the morning after the election. Trump declared victory. Days later, when Biden was projected the winner, Trump baselessly alleged election fraud. As part of an effort to overturn the results, Trump and his allies filed many legal challenges to the results, which were rejected by at least 86 judges in both state and federal courts for having no factual or legal basis. Trump's allegations were also refuted by state election officials, and the Supreme Court declined to hear a case asking it to overturn the results in 4 states won by Biden. Trump repeatedly sought help to overturn the results, personally pressuring Republican local and state office holders. Republican legislators, the Justice Department, and Vice President Pence, urging various actions such as replacing presidential electors, or requesting that Georgia officials find votes and announce a recalculated result. In the weeks after the election, Trump withdrew from public activities. He initially blocked government officials from cooperating in Biden's presidential transition. After 3 weeks, the administrator of the General Services Administration declared Biden the apparent winner of the election, allowing the disbursement of transition resources to his team. While Trump said he recommended that the GSA begin transition protocols, he still did not formally concede. Trump did not attend Biden's inauguration on January 20. In December 2020, reports emerged that the U.S. military was on red alert, and ranking officers had discussed what to do if Trump declared martial law. CIA Director Gina Haspel and Army General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, grew concerned that Trump might attempt a coup or military action against China or Iran. Milley insisted that he be consulted about any military orders from Trump, including the use of nuclear weapons. At noon on January 6, 2021, while Congress was certifying the presidential election results in the U.S. Capitol, Trump held a rally at the nearby Ellipse. Speaking from behind a glass barrier, he called for the election to be overturned and urged his supporters to fight like hell and take back our country by marching to the Capitol. His supporters then formed a mob that broke into the building, disrupting certification and causing the evacuation of Congress. During the attack, Trump posted on social media but did not ask the rioters to disperse. In a tweet at 6 p.m., he told them to go home with love and in peace, called them great patriots, and restated that he had won the election. Congress later reconvened and confirmed Biden's victory in the early hours of January 7. More than 140 police officers were injured, and 5 people died during or after the attack. The event has been described as an attempted self-coup by Trump. Upon leaving the White House, Trump began living at Mar-a-Lago, establishing an office there as provided for by the former President's Act. His continuing false claims concerning the 2020 election were commonly referred to as the Big Lie by his critics, although in May 2021, with his supporters he began using the term to refer to the election itself. The Republican Party used his election narrative to justify imposing new voting restrictions in its favor. As of July 2022, he continued to pressure state legislators to overturn the election. Unlike other former presidents, Trump continued to dominate his party. A 2022 profile in the New York Times described him as a modern party boss. He continued fundraising, raising a war chest containing more than twice that of the Republican Party, and profited from fundraisers many Republican candidates held at Mar-a-Lago. Much of his focus was on party governance and installing in key posts officials loyal to him. In the 2022 midterm elections, he endorsed over 200 candidates for various offices. In February 2021, he registered a new company, Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, for providing social networking services to U.S. customers. In March 2024, TMTG merged with special purpose acquisition company Digital World Acquisition and became a public company. In February 2022, TMTG launched Truth Social, a social media platform. In 2019, journalist E. Jean Carroll accused Trump of raping her in the 1990s and sued him for defamation over his denial. Carroll sued him again in 2022 for battery and more defamation. He was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation and ordered to pay $5 million in one case and $83.3 million in the other. In 2022, New York filed a civil lawsuit against Trump accusing him of inflating the Trump Organization's value to gain an advantage with lenders and banks. He was found liable and ordered to pay $350 million plus interest. In connection with Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and his involvement in the January 6 attack, in December 2022 the U.S. House Committee on the Attack recommended criminal charges against him for obstructing an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and inciting or assisting an insurrection. In August 2023, he was indicted on 13 charges, including racketeering, by a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia for his efforts to subvert the 2020 election in the state. In January 2022, the National Archives and Records Administration retrieved 15 boxes of documents Trump had taken to Mar-a-Lago after leaving the White House, some of which were classified. In the ensuing Justice Department investigation, officials retrieved more classified documents from his lawyers. On August 8, 2022, FBI agents searched Mar-a-Lago for illegally held documents, including those in breach of the Espionage Act, collecting 11 sets of classified documents, some marked top secret. A federal grand jury constituted by special counsel Jack Smith indicted Trump in June 2023 on 31 counts of willfully retaining national defense information under the Espionage Act, among other charges. Trump pleaded not guilty. In July 2024, Judge Aileen Cannon dismissed the case, ruling Smith's appointment as special prosecutor was unconstitutional. In May 2024, Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. The case stemmed from evidence that he booked Michael Cohen's hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels as business expenses to cover up his alleged 2006 to 2007 affair with Daniels during the 2016 election. On January 10, 2025, the judge gave Trump a no-penalty sentence known as an unconditional discharge, saying that punitive requirements would have interfered with presidential immunity. After his re-election, the 2020 election obstruction case and the classified documents case were dismissed without prejudice due to Justice Department policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. In November 2022, Trump announced his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election and created a fundraising account. In March 2023, the campaign began diverting 10% of the donations to his leadership PAC. His campaign had paid $100 million towards his legal bills by March 2024. In December 2023, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled him disqualified for the Colorado Republican primary for his role in inciting the January 6, 2021, attack on Congress. In March 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court restored his name to the ballot in a unanimous decision, ruling that Colorado lacks the authority to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars insurrectionists from holding federal office. During the campaign, Trump made increasingly violent and authoritarian statements. He said that he would weaponize the FBI and the Justice Department against his political opponents and use the military to target Democratic politicians and those that do not support his candidacy. He used harsher, more dehumanizing anti-immigrant rhetoric than during his presidency. His harsher rhetoric against his political enemies has been described by some historians and scholars as authoritarian, fascist, and unlike anything a political candidate has ever said in American history. Age and health concerns also arose during the campaign, with several medical experts highlighting an increase in rambling, tangential speech and behavioral disinhibition. Trump mentioned rigged election and election interference earlier and more frequently than in the 2016 and 2020 campaigns and refused to commit to accepting the 2024 election results. Analysts for the New York Times describe this as an intensification of his "heads I win, tails you cheated" rhetorical strategy. The newspaper said the claim of a rigged election had become the backbone of the campaign. On July 13, 2024, Trump was shot in the ear in an assassination attempt at a campaign rally in Butler Township, Pennsylvania. 2 days later, the 2024 Republican National Convention nominated him as their presidential candidate, with Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate. In September, he was targeted in another assassination attempt in Florida. Trump won the election in November 2024 with 312 electoral votes to incumbent Vice President Kamala Harris's 226. Making him the second president in U.S. history to be elected to a non-consecutive second term. He also won the popular vote with 49.8% to Harris's 48.3%. His victory in 2024 was part of a global backlash against incumbent parties, in part due to the 2021 to 2023 inflation surge. Several outlets described his re-election as an extraordinary comeback.
This is where I will be ending this video. Remember, do not take everything stated in this video as concrete fact. I did very little to investigate everything in this video for the sake of I'm lazy. Research on your own time if you want, which I encourage you to do if you have any strong opinions towards anything stated in this video. If you want to see any other articles read out in a shitty AI voice over Minecraft gameplay, then put it in the comments. If you watched all the way through this, you're either autistic or have ADHD.
Birthday looks much better than me. Birthday eggs.